Hello everyone, and welcome to the Installation and Setup lecture. It's time to get set up for the course. In this lecture, we're mainly going to be installing two things. One is PostgreSQL, which is a SQL engine that stores data and then reads in our query and returns back information from the database. The second thing we're going to install is pgadmin. This is a graphical user interface that lies on top of PostgreSQL that just makes it easier for us to have a graphical interface in which to type our queries. So it'll directly connect with PostgreSQL and just make things like restoring a database a lot easier. Please note that we want to make sure you follow each step in order carefully. There's two really common confusion points during the installation process. One is we have a database file called dvdrental.tar file as a resource in this lecture. Do not open that file directly. Often students get confused because it looks like a PDF or the computer recognizes it as a different type of file. You don't need to worry about any of that. Later on, we'll just download it, but do not open it directly. The second really common confusion point is forgetting the password you set up for PostgreSQL. It's really important that you write down and remember that password when that step comes. All right, so to help avoid any missed steps, we've gone ahead and numbered the steps. So as we go through this, you should be able to follow along and you'll see step 1, step 2, step 3, etc. So we'll present them in the correct order for you. Let's go ahead and get started. Step number 1 is to download and install PostgreSQL. Let's head over to an internet browser. All right, go ahead and in your browser go to google.com and then search for PostgreSQL, hit enter, and the very first link that isn't an advertisement should be www.postgresql.org. So we'll go ahead and click on that. This is the official site for PostgreSQL. And then this takes us to the official site. And essentially somewhere on this page, you should see a download button. Go ahead and either click up here where it says download or click the download button here. This site page does change from time to time, so you may have to look around to see where the download button is. But overall, we want to click to download, and it's typically at postgresql.org/download. And then as we come down here, we'll see something called different binary packages for Linux. Then there's macOS, Solaris, Windows, etc. There's also the source code. Right now, I'm on a Windows computer, so I will go ahead and click Windows for the correct download. And then you'll notice that it says Interactive Installer by Enterprise DB. There's also different information on platform support. You may have to choose a different version depending on what version of Windows you're running. If you're running an older version of Windows, especially a 32-bit version of Windows, you may need to download a lower version of PostgreSQL. So quickly make sure that the version of Windows you're running is compatible with whatever PostgreSQL version you install. Okay, I'm going to come back up here and then hit download the installer. Keep in mind, this does change from time to time as far as the description. It may say graphical installer by Enterprise DB, but overall, we're getting the installer from Enterprise DB. Go ahead and click on that. It will take you to enterprisedb.com, download, etc. And you're going to click the correct download version for you. So right now, I'm running on a Windows computer. I'll go ahead and just select the most recent version. If you're running on an older Windows computer, you may have to downgrade to a lower version. So we're going to go ahead and look at the Windows column and then hit download. Okay, so your download should begin automatically. Here you can see I'm on Google Chrome, and over here on the bottom left, it's downloading that PostgreSQL executable file. I'm going to fast forward in time until this is done downloading. All right, that's done downloading for me, so I will go ahead and open up that executable file. Upon launching that executable file, you should see the setup wizard pop up. If for some reason you don't see the setup wizard pop up, make sure that you don't have a firewall blocking this installer from opening, especially if you're on a work computer or business internet connection. Okay, so here we have set up PostgreSQL. We'll go ahead and click Next. Go ahead and please specify the directory. I recommend just choosing the default installation directory. We'll go ahead and click Next. And then it's going to ask you to select what components you want to install. Go ahead and just leave everything selected as is. Notice that it's selected pgadmin 4 for us anyways. We'll go ahead and just leave everything as the default. Click Next. And then go ahead and select the data directory of where to store the data. Make sure you choose the default. And this is the extremely important part. It's asking us to please provide a password for the database super user. So you have to absolutely make sure that you remember this password. I highly recommend that you make it something extremely simple, just like password in all lowercase. This isn't really a security issue since it's just a learning exercise. We will be just running this locally on our computer. So I'm not too concerned about someone hacking into my computer. So I'll just say password and then password. There's no way I can really help you if you forget what this password is. So if you forget what this password is, you're essentially going to have to uninstall everything and reinstall all over again. So please, if you name your password something else that's difficult to remember, write it down somewhere. I cannot help you if you forget this password. Okay, so I set up my password as just lowercase password. We will be asked for this later on. Next, it's going to ask you to please select the port number the server should be listening on. By default, it should say the port number is 5432. If you get another number like 5433 or 5434, etc., that's okay too. We can later on show you how to make sure you're connecting to the correct port number when we install pgadmin. Most likely, by default, you have 5432, unless for some reason you may have maybe an older version of PostgreSQL on your computer already existing and listening on a specific port. So we have it right now as default as 5432, so we'll keep it that way. We'll go ahead and click Next. It's going to ask you to select the location to be used by the new database cluster. Go ahead and just leave it as the default location. Hit Next. And then it's going to tell you all the settings you just chose. That's okay too. Hit Next. Setup is ready to install. Hit Next. And let's go ahead and let it install. And this essentially concludes step number 1. I'm going to fast forward in time until this is done installing. All right, this is done installing. You'll notice at the very end it asks you if you want to launch Stack Builder. You don't need to launch that, so I'm going to unclick the launching of that and then just hit Finish. That's the end of step 1. It's time to move on to step number 2. Just download and install pgadmin. To start off, go ahead and go to your browser and then go to google.com and search for pgadmin. I'm going to do that now. Okay, here I am at google.com. I search for pgadmin, and the first thing that should pop up that isn't an advertisement is pgadmin.org. Go ahead and select that link. It'll take you to this website, pgadmin. pgadmin is the graphical user interface that we're going to be using to actually perform queries and connect to PostgreSQL during the course. And what's interesting about pgadmin, it actually uses your browser as the graphical user interface. So after we install it, we'll be able to open it up within our browser. So somewhere along this page, you should see a download button. So it's either going to be up here in download, or there's quick links here for both an online demo if you want to check it out. You can open this up and try it out here in your browser, start a situation, and it sets something up for you. And it has a little bit of a sandbox here that you can check out. It'll kind of play around with a certain thing, ask you for your email address, etc. But in our case, we're going to go ahead and leave this and just click on download, since we're going to be installing it anyways. There's 2 versions of pgadmin, pgadmin 4 and then pgadmin 3. Keep in mind, if you're running an older version of Windows, you may need to use pgadmin 3 instead of pgadmin 4. And even though it says pgadmin 3 is no longer supported, that just means that they're not updating it anymore, which makes sense if you're running an older version of Windows. So if you're on an older version of Windows, like Windows 7 or something, you may need to actually use pgadmin 3. But if you're on the latest version of any of these operating systems, Mac OS, Windows, some Linux distribution, you should be good for pgadmin 4. I'm going to go ahead and click on Windows, since I'm on a Windows computer. You realize there's multiple versions of pgadmin 4. They keep releasing updates to it. And I'm going to hit on pgadmin 4 version 4.18, the latest version released. So I'll click on that, and it's going to take me to something that looks like this. And it's a little confusing at first, but essentially all we need to download is the actual executable file that's within this. And if you take a look, it should be the largest file we're actually downloading. So go ahead and download this executable file for pgadmin. And you can see down here, it's downloading. It'll be done in a few seconds. Once you've gone ahead and downloaded the executable file, go ahead and open it up and run it. Keep in mind, you may need to run it as an administrator. So make sure you have admin permissions on your computer, and you can right-click and run this as an admin. So I'll click on that. And now we have the setup wizard for pgadmin. Most of this, we're just going to choose a default. So we'll go ahead and click Next, accept the agreement, hit Next. Select the default location, that's going to be okay, hit Next. It's going to ask you what you want to call the start menu option. Let's go ahead and click next, and then just hit install. Okay, and that's pretty much it for installing pgadmin. I'm going to fast forward until this is done installing. And now it's finished installing. We are not actually going to launch pgadmin yet. We have step number 3 to move on here. So you can go ahead and unclick the launch pgadmin 4 and then just hit finish. It's now time for step 3 of our process, where we're going to download, but remember, do not directly open the dvdrental.tar file. The dvdrental.tar file is a compressed version of the database we're going to be using for this course. You can download it as a resource in this lecture. Keep in mind that we're only downloading it. Do not attempt to unzip it or try to open it with any other program. It may say that the file is damaged and Windows can't find a program to open it with. That's okay. This file is not meant to be opened by anything other than pgadmin. So please do not double click on this file after downloading it. The only thing we're going to do is download the file. Let's see how to do that. If you check out the Udemy support page on downloading supplemental resources, as you're watching this particular video, over on the right-hand side, you should see a little resources button pop up, and then you'll see the dvdrental.tar file. So what that's actually going to look like is you'll be watching the Complete SQL Bootcamp, and then over here on the actual lecture, you'll hit resources, and then select dvdrental.tar. Go ahead and click on it, and it should download. And I'm going to open the file location. Recall, do not double-click or open this .tar file directly. You can see here that I now have it underneath my downloads under dvdrental.tar. Things that are important to keep in mind is to not directly double click or open on this file. And the second thing to keep in mind is you must know the exact location of this file. So I know that it's underneath my downloads folder. If you have any questions of where this file is actually located, you can always right click and then select properties, and you'll see the full location right here of wherever it happens to be on your computer. We're going to need that when we actually restore the file. Okay, so that's all you need to do is download it as a resource from this lecture. Do not open it and do not double click it. All right, step number 4 is to go ahead and restart your computer. To make sure all the actual changes due to PostgreSQL and pgadmin have taken place, we need to restart the computer. I'm going to go ahead and restart my computer and then move on to step number 5. Step number 5 is to restore the database. A quick note on this step is you can ignore the failed execode that may appear during the restoration. Depending on your exact version of your operating system and the exact version of the PostgreSQL you installed, there is sometimes a failed execode that appears that basically indicates that the restoration accidentally happened twice. That's totally okay, because what happens is it works the first time and then it doesn't do it a second time because the first time worked. So you'll be able to safely ignore that failed execode if it does appear. So let's go ahead and open pgadmin to get started. So on your computer, go ahead and search for pgadmin. Make sure you're actually opening pgadmin, the application, and not the executable file. Otherwise, you'll just end up reinstalling it. So don't click on this executable file, but instead click on the actual pgadmin program, this application. So I'm going to open that up, and what's going to happen is you should see it eventually open up in the browser. Okay, and here it is in the browser. Notice that right now it's running in the browser. This doesn't actually mean it requires an internet connection to run. It's just using the actual browser as a graphical interface. Then it asks you to set a master password. I would highly recommend that you set this to something very simple and easy to remember, since you're going to need this later on. I'm going to just set the password to password in all lowercase, which actually matches that PostgreSQL password we set up earlier. Then we'll go ahead and click OK. And now it's time to restore the database. If you click here on servers, you may actually see various versions of PostgreSQL depending on which one you've installed. If you follow along with me, most likely you'll just see PostgreSQL 12. I've actually installed different versions of PostgreSQL on this computer, so I see all the options. But in your case, you're most likely just going to see PostgreSQL 12. We'll go ahead and click on PostgreSQL 12, and you can double click on this, and then it's going to ask you to enter the password for the user Postgres. This is the exact same password we initially set up during the installation of PostgreSQL. So I will say lowercase password, and go ahead and save the password. That way you don't need to enter it every time. So again, all I did was I double-clicked on PostgreSQL 12. It's going to connect to the server using the password that I set up earlier. Hit OK. And now you should see it connected with this little elephant symbol. So I've connected to my server and everything's good to go. If you get an error there on the Postgres, you can try leaving the password blank, but really, most likely you enter the password wrong and you may need to go back and look down to where you wrote that password. Now it's time to actually restore the database. So we've connected to a server. You'll notice that there's that default Postgres database. So next we're going to right-click on PostgreSQL 12 after connecting to it. And then we're going to say, create a database. And then the database we're going to create is called DVD rental. And then we'll say save. And then that creates what is essentially this little empty database here. So you can go ahead and click on it, and we can see that the database is created, but right now there's no tables or information in this database. So we're going to restore the database. And we do that by right-clicking now on that database and going down here, and we're going to say restore. Click on restore, and make sure that underneath format it says custom or tar file. And then what we're going to do is we're going to grab that dvdrental.tar file location and pass it here as file name. Now there's two ways of doing this. One is to click on these three little dots and then search around for wherever you happen to save that file. And keep in mind, you may need to show hidden files and folders and have all files as the format. And you can see here, I have found dvdrental.tar, and then I can select it. And here now I have the full file path. Now, what sometimes occurs is when you click these 3 points, you actually are in a weird location on your computer and you can't actually find it. You can try navigating using this home or using backup, and sometimes you're in this kind of weird location and you don't really know how to actually find that dvdrental.tar file. That's totally okay. All you need to do is just manually type in the file name. So how can we do that? Well, I can come back to where I actually saved that dvdrental.tar file. Recall I can click on properties here, and then all I need to do is just copy and paste this location. So I'll go ahead and copy that, and then I could manually paste it in here. That's now the location, and then just add in dvdrental.tar file. So you have two options. One is to try to locate the file using this little graphical user interface. If you're doing that, make sure you're showing hidden files and folders, as well as showing all files. And you can navigate by going back home here or going back, etc. Or you can just manually type out the file name. So if this 3-dot version doesn't work for you, just go ahead and manually type it out. Then we're going to come to restore options, and we're going to make sure that we select pre-data as yes, data as yes, and then post-data as yes. Okay. Those are actually the only sections that we need to worry about as far as these restore options are concerned. You can leave everything else as the default. We'll come back to general, and then we'll go ahead and select restore. Click on restore, it'll say restore job created. Now, depending on your actual version of PostgreSQL, you may see this little failed execode pop up. And it'll say failed execode 1. You can go ahead and click on more details. And if you read these details, it's essentially just saying, hey, it failed to create it twice. So sometimes on certain systems, it accidentally creates it twice. That's totally okay. We can safely ignore that. So what we're going to do here is our dvdrental.tar file has been successfully restored. The only thing we need to do now is refresh in order to actually see those changes. So I'm going to right-click on dvdrental. You'll notice it has this refresh. Go ahead and refresh, and now what's going to happen is underneath the actual dvdrental database, we should be able to perform a sample query to make sure everything's running. So I'm going to right-click, and then I'm going to select Query Tool. Query Tool is essentially what we're going to be using for the rest of the course, and this allows us to actually perform a query and then ask for information back. So we're going to say select, and then an asterisk, from film, semicolon. And then to run this, you can go ahead and click this little play button. So it's the execute refresh. Go ahead and run that. And you should see now under data output, some actual information here. Okay, and if you see this information, then everything was successful. If for some reason it says film does not exist, which is sometimes a common error, make sure you restart your computer. If it still doesn't say that film does not exist, go ahead and try a lower version of PostgreSQL, because most likely what's happening is your specific OS doesn't work with that specific version of PostgreSQL. So you can just repeat the steps for any previous version of PostgreSQL. But we can see here that everything is working, and this is what we're going to be using for the rest of the course. So we can check out this query editor anytime by clicking underneath the version of PostgreSQL, underneath databases, DVD rental, right click, and then you would just hit query tool. Okay, and that's it for how to perform a query with pgadmin and successfully restore the database. If you have any questions, please make sure to check out the Q&A forums. We have hundreds of already answered questions there, so I would highly recommend you check those out first before posting a new question in order to save yourself some time. Thank you so much, and I'll see you at the next lecture.